I should have never signed that paper. If I'd known what was coming, I would have burned it right there in that office. The storm outside wasn't the only one brewing that afternoon. I sat in the stiff leather chair of a downtown lawyer's office, my heart thudding in my chest louder than the rain hammering the window. My name is Linda Foster. I'm 62 years old, widowed for 12 long years. I spent most of those years raising my son Greg the best I knew how. I thought we were close. I thought he loved me. Greg sat beside me that day, squeezing my hand with the same warmth he had when he was a boy. "Mom, this is just paperwork," he whispered, that familiar, reassuring smile on his face. "It's to protect the house. Keep it in the family. You'll always live there. Nothing will change." I hesitated. I'd heard horror stories about signing things without understanding them. But this was my son, my only child, the one I sacrificed everything for. My signature felt heavier than the pen I held. I pressed it to the page. "See nothing to worry about," Greg said, kissing my cheek. He tucked the papers under his arm and led me out into the rain, promising we'd have dinner soon. I should have felt relief. Instead, an ache settled in my gut that no cup of tea could soothe. Later that evening, after picking up groceries, I returned to the house that had been my sanctuary since my husband passed. The kettle was just beginning to whistle when a knock rattled the front door. I opened it to find two burly movers standing on my porch. Behind them stood Greg, and with him a tall blonde woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper smirk. Tina, his new fiancée. "Mom, we need to talk," Greg said, his voice suddenly colder than the rain. Before I could respond, Tina sauntered inside, surveying the living room like a queen inspecting her new castle. "We've decided to move in. You'll need to pack your things tonight." My heart stopped. "What, Greg? What are you talking about?" Greg glanced away, unable to meet my eyes. "You don't belong here anymore. We need our space." I laughed, a nervous, broken sound. "Greg, I signed those papers because you said nothing would change. This is my home." Tina crossed her arms. "Not anymore. You gave it to him. We're starting fresh here." Panic clawed at my throat. I looked at my son, pleading, "Greg, please, don't do this." But the boy I raised was gone. In his place stood a man I no longer recognized. "It's done, Mom. Please don't make this harder." Before I could gather my thoughts, the movers began hauling boxes. Tina tossed an old photo album at my feet. "Take what you want," she sneered. I was numb, moving through the house like a ghost as strangers packed away my life. Within an hour, I stood on the porch, soaked by the rain, clutching a small suitcase and my purse. Greg shut the door with finality. The lock clicked. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the house I'd built, the memories now shut away behind that door. With nowhere else to go, I wandered toward the nearest bus stop. The rain showed no mercy. I sat on the cold metal bench purse in my lap, groceries forgotten somewhere along the way. Across the street, the house still glowed warmly through the windows. My house. Tears blurred my vision. "How did it come to this?" I whispered. As the bus headlights approached, I wiped my face and stood. One thing was clear. This was far from over. How do you go from "Mom, I love you" to being tossed out like garbage? That question looped through my mind as I stared at the stained ceiling of the motel room. The bed creaked beneath me with every breath. The carpet smelled like mildew. I'd rented the room by the hour. At first, couldn't bring myself to commit to a whole night. The man behind the desk hadn't asked questions, just slid a worn key across the counter. I was grateful for that. I didn't think I could handle another person looking at me like I was pathetic. The hunger came first, or rather, the lack of it. The groceries I'd bought that afternoon were long gone, left on my front porch like everything else. I tried to nibble on some crackers from a vending machine, but they tasted like cardboard. Sleep was worse. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Greg's face, not the cold stranger from earlier, but the little boy who used to run into my arms when he was scared. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'll never leave you." The words echoed from a memory so vivid it felt like a cruel joke. I'd raised him alone after Harold, my husband, passed in a factory accident when Greg was just 6. We barely scraped by. I cleaned houses during the day and waitressed at night. There were days I went without eating so Greg would have enough. Every science project, every scraped knee, every heartbreak, I was there. Always. And now, I had nothing. Tears burned hot trails down my cheeks as I lay curled on the sagging mattress. My chest felt hollow, as if my heart had been scooped out and left somewhere on that rain-soaked porch. I kept replaying the scene, Greg's cold voice, Tina's smug smile, the movers treating my life like it was disposable. "You don't belong here anymore." The words gutted me anew with every replay. I'd trusted him, believed him when he said I'd always have my home. What mother expects her own child to turn on her like that? I couldn't call anyone. Most of my friends were gone or had drifted away after Harold died. And what could I say anyway? "Hi, it's Linda. My only son stole my house and kicked me out." The shame was unbearable. But there was one person left. Martha. We'd met 30 years ago when our kids were in the same kindergarten class. She was bold, loud, and fiercely loyal, everything I wasn't. We drifted in and out of touch, but I knew if anyone could handle this nightmare, it was her. My fingers shook as I dialed her number from the motel's grimy phone. 3 rings. "Hello." Her voice nearly broke me. "Martha, it's Linda." A pause. "Linda, are you okay? You sound awful." And just like that, the dam burst. I told her everything. The lawyer's office, the papers, the eviction, Tina, the motel room. "Stay put," she said, voice hard as steel. "I'm coming." I hung up and stared at the door, half expecting Greg to burst through and finish what he started. Instead, after what felt like an eternity, there was a knock. "Martha," I whispered. She strode in like a whirlwind. Gray curls frizzed from the rain eyes, blazing. "Good God, Linda. What the hell happened to you?" I started to explain again, but she waved me off and wrapped me in the first real hug I'd had in days. "We're going to fix this," she said firmly. "That boy has no idea who he's messing with." For the first time since it all began, a flicker of hope sparked in my chest. I wasn't alone anymore. Word spread like wildfire in Millbrook. It always did. Within 2 days of Greg tossing me out, my name was already dripping from the lips of half the town. Only the story wasn't the one I would have told. Apparently, my son had gotten ahead of things. I heard it first, through Martha's neighbor, Mrs. Klein, who ran into us while we were picking up bread at the market. "Oh, Linda, I'm so sorry to hear about your decision," she said, voice soft as a feather, eyes full of misplaced sympathy. "My decision?" I asked, puzzled. Mrs. Klein blinked. "Well, that you chose to move out to give Greg and Tina space. That's what he's been telling folks." I stared at her, cold seeping through my bones. "That's a lie." She flushed. Oh my, I didn't know." She hurried away before I could say another word. Martha, standing beside me, was livid. "That little weasel. He's out here painting himself as some poor man. just trying to live his life with his fiancée while his sweet mother voluntarily gave up the house. I couldn't speak. The humiliation was too thick. "You listen to me," Linda Martha said, grabbing my hand. "You don't hide from this. You tell people the truth." I wasn't sure I had the strength, but Martha did, and she wasn't about to let Greg's lies win. Later that afternoon, she stormed off to do some digging, armed with nothing but righteous fury and her old nurse's determination. By evening, she came back with an earful. "Greg's been busy," she said, tossing her raincoat on a chair. "He's told half the block that you finally wanted to downsize, and that you graciously transferred the house to him so he and Tina could settle in." I sat down hard. My heart pounded so loud I could barely think. "And the worst part," Martha continued, "folks believe him. He's your son. Why would he lie? That's what they're asking. Of course they would. In a town like Millbrook, where appearances matter and folks prefer not to meddle, it was easier to swallow Greg's version than to confront the ugly truth." Martha paced the room. "We can't let this stand. You've got to speak up. I'll be damned if he ruins your name on top of everything else." But shame had sunk its claws deep. How do you tell the world your own child betrayed you? How do you say that out loud? Sensing my hesitation, Martha leaned in. "Linda, you didn't do anything wrong. He did. And if we don't speak up, he'll win." That night, after a lot of tears and even more coaxing, I agreed to tell her everything. Sitting at her kitchen table, I poured it all out the lawyer's office. Greg's promises, the eviction, the motel, every horrible detail. When I finished, Martha's face was red with fury. "That settles it," she said. "Tomorrow we start setting the record straight." True to her word, the next morning Martha hit the town. She stopped by the cafe, the pharmacy, even the beauty salon anywhere gossip brewed. At each place, she told the truth loud and clear, that I'd been manipulated, betrayed, and thrown out of my own home. By the afternoon, my phone began buzzing. Some calls were awkward friends, unsure what to believe. Others were supportive, offering prayers and comfort. But the one that shook me most came from Pastor Evans. "Linda," he said gently, "I'm so sorry for what's happened. If you'd like, you're welcome to speak at the church meeting this Sunday. People need to hear your side." I swallowed hard. I'm not sure I can." "You can," Martha said, squeezing my shoulder. "And you will." As Sunday approached, nerves tangled inside me. But as I stood before the congregation, heart pounding, I spoke my truth. By the time I finished, you could have heard a pin drop. For the first time since Greg locked that door, the tide had begun to shift. "You need to fight back." Martha's words rang out across her kitchen firm as a judge's gavel. I sat clutching my mug of tea, hands trembling. It was Monday morning, a full week since the eviction. The town was buzzing after my speech at church. Some folks now believed me. Others weren't sure. But public opinion wouldn't get my home back. "I don't know, Martha," I whispered. "Greg's smart. He had me sign those papers. It's all legal now, isn't it?" Martha planted her fists on her hips. "Legal doesn't make it right. And legal doesn't mean unchangeable. We're going to a lawyer. Period." She wasn't asking for my permission. Within an hour, we were sitting across from a young attorney named Rachel Nguyen in a small but tidy office downtown. Rachel listened patiently as I recounted the nightmare, voice shaking, as I described each moment, especially the day at the lawyer's office. When I finished, Rachel leaned back, brows furrowed. "Well," she said carefully, What your son did is morally reprehensible. Unfortunately, from a legal standpoint, the deed transfer is valid on its face. Unless... My breath caught. Unless what? Unless we can prove coercion, or that you weren't of sound mind when you signed. My heart sank. Rachel went on. Did anything unusual happen around that time? Were you ill on medication? That question triggered a memory I hadn't allowed myself to revisit. 3 weeks before I signed the papers, I'd undergone gallbladder surgery. The recovery had been rough. I'd been on strong painkillers and barely able to stay awake some days. Greg had been the one driving me to appointments, cooking meals, making sure I took my meds. He'd seemed so attentive, so caring. But now, a different light illuminated those moments. There was one evening vivid as daylight, where I'd been groggy on the couch, drifting in and out. Greg had sat beside me, speaking softly. "Mom, when you're feeling better, we need to handle the house paperwork. Just a formality. You'll still live here. You trust me, don't you?" I'd nodded, eyes half closed. Days later, still weak and foggy, he'd driven me to the lawyer's office. I remembered struggling to focus the words on the papers swimming before my eyes. But Greg had smiled, squeezed my hand. "It's just to protect the house," he'd whispered. "I'll take care of everything." Now the pieces clicked. He'd waited until I was vulnerable physically and mentally. I looked at Rachel, voice breaking. I wasn't well. I was still recovering. On medication. He knew. She nodded. "That may be the angle we need. If we can demonstrate that you were under undue influence or lacked capacity at the time of signing the court, might void the transfer." A flicker of hope sparked inside me, quickly tempered by her next words. "But it won't be easy. We'll need medical records, witness statements, anything to build your case. And Greg will fight this hard." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I'm ready," I said softly. "I have to be." Martha beamed. "That's the spirit." Rachel smiled too. "Good. I'll get started on a motion to challenge the deed. And Linda, don't let anyone talk you out of this. You deserve your home back." As we left the office, a weight had lifted just slightly. For the first time, I had a path forward. But I also knew this would get uglier before it got better. Greg wouldn't take this lying down. As the sun set behind the courthouse, I made a silent vow I would fight. No matter how long it took, I would take back what was mine. While Martha and I were building our case, Greg was digging his own grave, and he didn't even know it. I found out about it through Martha's friend Doris, who overheard a conversation at the real estate office downtown. Linda, Doris said breathlessly over the phone, "I just heard Greg's listing your house met with an agent yesterday." My stomach dropped. I gripped the edge of the table. He can't. He wouldn't. But of course he would. Greg wasn't content with just stealing my home. He wanted to turn it into quick cash. Martha paced the room. "I bet he's running out of money. Probably why he pulled this stunt to begin with." She wasn't wrong. What none of us knew yet but were about to learn was that Greg's gambling habit had spiraled out of control. He owed thousands to an online betting ring. The eviction wasn't about building a life with Tina. It was about liquidating assets before the collectors came knocking. Greg had kept this from Tina too. He knew she'd never tolerate it, not when she was dreaming of their perfect future. But greed makes men sloppy. A week after he met with the real estate agent, Tina found the listing accidentally while browsing homes online. There it was, my house posted with bright photos and a motivated seller tag. She stared at the screen in disbelief. That night, while Greg was out meeting his bookie, Tina started digging. She found bank statements tucked in Greg's desk drawer, overdraft notices, credit card max-outs, and most damning of all, wire transfers to a known gambling site. By the time Greg stumbled through the door, reeking of whiskey and desperation, Tina was waiting for him, arms crossed, laptop open to the house listing. "What is this, Greg?" she demanded. He froze. It's nothing. Just exploring options. Exploring options. You told me this house was our future." Greg's mask slipped, the charm, the easy grin all gone. Now just a man cornered by his own lies. "I need the money, Tina," he snapped. "We need it." For what gambling debts, she shot back, brandishing the bank statements. "You lied to me. You lied about everything." Greg tried to regain control. "Listen, it's not what you think. I've got it under control." But Tina wasn't buying it. "And your mother. You kicked her out so you could sell the house and cover your sorry ass." He winced. She was old. She didn't need it anymore. Tina's eyes blazed. "She was your mother, Greg, the woman who raised you alone, and you threw her out like trash." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick as smoke. Then Tina grabbed her purse. "I'm done. Wait, Tina, please." But she was already out the door. Meanwhile, Martha and I were gathering more evidence. When Martha heard about the house listing, she wasted no time calling Rachel. "That boy's desperate," Martha said, "and desperate men make mistakes." Rachel agreed. "If he tries to sell before the court rules, it could work in our favor. Show he acted in bad faith." We added the listing to our growing pile of evidence. As for me, I was torn. Part of me felt sick watching my son self-destruct. But the other part, wounded and furious, wanted justice. Greg had shown his true face now, and there was no turning back. I would fight with everything I had. Because now, I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Martha always said life had a funny way of giving you what you needed when you least expected it. At first, I thought she was just trying to cheer me up. But 2 weeks into our legal battle, her words rang truer than ever. It all started one rainy afternoon. I'd been sorting through the few boxes of my belongings Martha had helped me rescue from the house. Old photo albums, Harold's fishing hat, a cracked porcelain vase. I was about to close the last box when Martha came in from the garage, her face flushed with excitement. "Linda, you're not gonna believe this," she said, clutching a faded manila envelope. "What is it?" I asked, heart thudding. She laid it gently on the kitchen table. "I was going through those old files in the garage. You know, the ones Harold kept in that filing cabinet. And look what I found." With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a yellowed copy of Harold's original will, dated shortly after we'd bought the house. And there, in his unmistakable handwriting, was a clause I'd long forgotten. "It is my wish that the property at 218 Willow Lane remain solely in Linda Foster's name for the duration of her life. No transfer or sale is to occur without her explicit consent and sound judgment." I gasped, tears springing to my eyes. But that wasn't all. Tucked behind the will was a folded sheet of lined paper, written in Harold's familiar scrawl. "Linda, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to know this house is yours. It's our home. Promise me you'll keep it safe and never let anyone take it from you, especially not under pressure." By the time I finished reading, I was sobbing openly. Martha hugged me tight. "Oh, honey, this is it. This could be the key to everything." I nodded, wiping my eyes. "Do you think it'll matter?" "Absolutely," she said. "It proves Harold's intentions. and that Greg violated them by manipulating you. We need to get this to Rachel. Now." Without wasting a second, we drove to Rachel's office. She read the documents carefully, eyes lighting up. "This is huge, Linda. The will alone strengthens your case, and the handwritten note adds clear evidence of your husband's wishes. Combined with your medical records and Greg's recent behavior, we've got a compelling argument." For the first time in weeks, hope bloomed inside me, small but fierce. Rachel leaned forward. "Here's what we'll do. We'll file a petition to void the deed transfer based on undue influence and lack of capacity. The will and note will bolster your claim of Harold's original intent." I swallowed hard. "Do you think the judge will listen?" Rachel smiled. "I can't guarantee an outcome, Linda. But with this evidence, you've got a real shot." Martha squeezed my hand. "We're not backing down." Over the next few days, Rachel worked tirelessly, gathering affidavits, compiling medical records, and drafting our legal brief. Meanwhile, word of Greg's house listing and Tina's sudden disappearance had spread through town. The tide of public opinion was shifting fast. Neighbors who'd once believed Greg now stopped me in the street, offering quiet words of support. But I kept my focus on the fight ahead. The court hearing was set for the following month. Every day leading up to it, Martha and I rehearsed, preparing for every possible question. "I still can't believe Harold saved that note," I said one night, holding the faded paper close. "He loved you," Linda Martha said gently. "He wanted to protect you. And now, even from beyond, he's helping you do just that." I nodded, determination hardening inside me. Greg had taken so much already, but with Harold's words in my corner, and Martha and Rachel by my side, I was ready to take it all back. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about standing up for Harold's memory, for my dignity, and for myself. And I wasn't going down without a fight. The morning of the hearing, I barely touched my breakfast. My stomach was a knot of nerves so tight, it hurt to breathe. Martha bustled around trying to distract me. "You've got this, Linda. Just tell the truth. That boy's lies won't hold up under a real judge." I wished I shared her confidence. Rachel arrived to drive us to the courthouse. "Just stay calm," she advised. "Let Greg talk himself into a corner. And when it's your turn, speak from the heart." When we arrived, Greg was already there, dressed in an expensive suit, hair slicked back, looking every bit the charming son he pretended to be. Tina was noticeably absent. Our eyes met briefly. He smirked. That smirk hardened my resolve. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Friends and neighbors filled the gallery faces I'd known for decades. Some gave me encouraging nods. Others looked away ashamed they'd once believed Greg. The judge, a silver-haired woman named Justice Harper, took her seat and called the session to order. Rachel opened with a clear, steady voice, laying out our case, how Greg manipulated me during my recovery, how he concealed the house sale plans, and most importantly, Harold's will and note. Greg's lawyer stood next. He painted a different picture entirely. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "my client acted out of love and duty. Mrs. Foster voluntarily gifted her son the house. There was no coercion, only gratitude for years of support." Gratitude. I nearly choked on the word. Then came the moment I dreaded taking the stand. Rachel guided me through gentle questions, letting me recount the events calmly. But when Greg's lawyer cross-examined, his tone turned sharp. "Mrs. Foster, are you sure you weren't simply showing generosity toward your only son? Perhaps you felt it was time to pass the home to the next generation." "No, I said firmly, voice trembling but clear. I never wanted to give up my home. I was sick. I trusted my son. He lied to me. Gasps rippled through the room. Then Greg himself was called. Swaggering to the stand, he wore that same smug expression. Of course she wanted me to have the house, he said confidently. She told me so many times. She even signed the deed willingly. Rachel's eyes gleamed. Mr. Foster, were you aware your mother was on pain medication and recovering from surgery at the time of signing? Greg hesitated just a beat too long. She was well enough to know what she was doing. Rachel pounced. And were you planning to sell the house immediately after securing the deed? Another pause. That was a financial decision, irrelevant to her signing. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Finally, Rachel handed me Harold's note. "Mrs. Foster," she said softly, "would you read this aloud for the court?" My hands shook as I unfolded the faded paper. The words blurred through my tears, but I forced myself to steady. "Linda, if anything ever happens to me, I want you to know this house is yours. It's our home. Promise me you'll keep it safe, and never let anyone take it from you, especially not under pressure." My voice cracked, but I finished. The room was silent. Justice Harper leaned forward, her eyes softening. "Mrs. Foster, was this note known to your son?" "No, Your Honor. He never saw it. But he knew my husband's wishes." Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat. After closing arguments, the judge called a brief recess. When we returned, she delivered her verdict swiftly. "I find clear evidence of undue influence and lack of informed consent. The deed transfer is hereby voided. The property is restored to Mrs. Foster's sole ownership." Relief flooded me. Greg's face twisted with shock and fury. But it was over. As I left the courtroom, applause broke out. Martha hugged me tight. "You did it, Linda," she whispered. "You took it all back." I smiled through tears. I hadn't just reclaimed my house. I'd reclaimed myself. The gavel's final strike still echoed in my mind as I stood outside the courthouse sunlight warming my face. It was done. Justice Harper's ruling was clear. The deed transfer had been coerced, the sale attempt in bad faith. The house was mine again, legally fully without question. I felt weightless, as if the years of guilt and shame had finally lifted from my shoulders. Across the parking lot, Greg stood frozen, face pale with fury and disbelief. Tina approached him, jaw set. "You disgust me," she spat, voice carrying through the still air. "Tina, wait." Greg reached for her. She yanked her arm back. "Don't touch me. You lied to your mother, lied to me." And for what gambling money? Greg's face crumpled, but Tina was already walking away, her heels clicking against the pavement like a judge's verdict. Then came the final blow. As Greg stormed toward his car, a tow truck pulled into the lot. The driver hopped out and handed him a notice. "Repossession order." "Sorry, pal." Greg's mouth opened in protest, but no words came. Moments later, his sleek car was being loaded onto the truck, a small crowd gathering to watch. I should have felt pity. Once I might have. But standing there surrounded by Martha and Rachel and neighbors who had come to support me, I felt only resolve. Greg had made his choices. Now he would live with them. Martha looped her arm through mine. "Come on, Linda. Let's go home." Home. The word rang sweeter than it ever had. When we pulled up to 218 Willow Lane, my heart caught in my throat. There it was. My house. The porch light Harold had installed, the rose bushes we'd planted together still blooming defiantly. For a moment, I just stood there taking it all in. Then I stepped inside. Room by room, I reclaimed my space. I ran my fingers over the worn kitchen counters, the dining table, where we'd shared 1,000 meals. I stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows I'd washed for years. In the hallway, I lingered by the family photos Greg had once tried to pack away. One by one, I set them back in place. Neighbors soon arrived, some with flowers, others with warm embraces. Mrs. Klein, teary-eyed, pressed a bouquet into my hands. "I'm so sorry, Linda. We should have believed you from the start." I smiled gently. "It's all right. I'm just glad to be home." Word spread fast, and by afternoon the house buzzed with friends. Later that week, Martha suggested we host a small tea party, a celebration of sorts. "You deserve this," she insisted. "You fought hard, Linda. Let folks share in your joy." So we did. On a sunny Saturday, my home filled with laughter and chatter. The scent of lavender tea and fresh scones wafted through the air. Martha, ever the life of the party, held court in the living room, retelling the story of our courtroom victory with dramatic flair. Rachel stopped by too, raising her cup in a toast. To Linda, a woman who reminds us all that strength comes in many forms. I blinked back happy tears. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, I stepped out onto the porch. The roses swayed gently in the breeze. The house stood strong behind me, not just a building, but a symbol of love, resilience, and home. I smiled a deep, steady smile that came from a place of hard-earned peace. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we never thought we'd have to fight. But no one has the right to steal your peace. And this time, I'd made sure of it, when 62-year-old Linda trusted her only son Greg to keep the house in the family. She never imagined he'd betray her. After signing over the deed, she was thrown out of her own home, left standing in the rain, heartbroken and alone. As gossip spreads through their small town, Greg paints her as a willing giver. But with the help of her fierce friend Martha and a determined lawyer, Linda uncovers a powerful piece of evidence, her late husband's note, that proves the house was always meant to stay hers. What follows is a dramatic courtroom showdown, where the truth finally comes to light, and Greg's lies unravel for all to see. If this story moved, you don't forget to subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you won't miss more true life dramas and empowering tales right here on our channel